let's just look at the missing family part of your question first, because going back in time, both the mindset of the world during the Kennedy administration and during the Reagan administrations was the family should take care of these people. Sounds good, sounds reasonable, until we realize that mom and dads die. Sometimes there is no extended family. And if there's no one to look after the person with either a high, medium, or low, functioning mental disability, ultimately, at some point, just because death happens to family members, they will be by themselves. So in the program that I'm describing, we are not going to stabilize them and put them on medication and throw them out into the street. That's kind of futile. So some of the things that we also need to bring to bear on this problem. One of the things that we probably should spend a good deal of time talking about, because it ties into a couple of our other issues in the campaign. Here I want to take this moment and give Arnold Schwarzenegger, who is the famous Austrian actor from Terminator, who wound up as California's governor. He saw the problem that we're describing out in LA, and he felt like he needed to do something, because he realized even the local and state governments in California were just so dysfunctional, and they weren't addressing the problem properly. He took out from his own pocket, I forgot what the overall amount was, but let's call it $1 million, but I'm sure that exact number's out there on the internet someplace, or call him, he'll probably tell you. But he went out and built a whole bunch of tiny houses. So when I say the word tiny house, this should be a term that's very popular and well known by Americans across the country. And he built a whole bunch of tiny houses in California. I would say each one of those tiny houses was probably about 150 square feet, more or less, maybe 200 square feet. Probably not even that much, probably 100, 150 square feet, 10 by 10, maybe 15 by 15, something along those lines. But basically they were big enough for a kitchen, a full bathroom, a bed, and a little, like a living room seating area. So something that a single person could quite easily call home. The door locked, there was air conditioning, there was heating, there's a roof over their head. You can pull the curtain back over the window. It is a home. And many of the homeless people are actually living in these places out in California. But the amount of available homes as in relation to the number of people who need housing, of course, is just a drop in a bucket. So Arnold Schwarzenegger just simply started the process. He is the tip of the end of the sword. But nevertheless, that is the right direction to go. So more specifically to your question is, once we stabilize the folks who have mental disabilities, once we put them on a road of drug rehabilitation, drug cure, then we have to deal with housing these people. Now, we can house them in any number of ways. Obviously, we're going to make sure that they have their food stamp card, the equivalent today, SNAP, but essentially it's a food stamp card. We're going to make sure they have access to housing, whether it's public housing. I much prefer the tiny house solution, because America is filled with land. All cities are filled with parks. There are so many places, pick your favorite city. There are so many places that we could build these tiny homes for this particular part of the population and clean things up, put people in stable housing. And then once that person is stabilized, they got a roof over their head, then of course the next step is to get them into jobs. And as we all know, just looking at the paper right now, every day, there are help wanted signs across the country. And the vast majority of those help wanted signs are for people doing minimally skilled or low skilled or no skilled jobs. And the population that we're talking about stabilizing and rehabilitating would do a fantastic job in this arena. But you notice that there's a process here. So that's the answer to your question. But I just want to say one other thing on this particular topic, just so the American voters know. I'm not talking theoretically from the top of my head, because everything I have just described, going back to my friends who embarked on this research project to find solutions to the drug addiction, to find solutions to the combination of mental disability and drug addiction. We did exactly what I'm saying. You can call it a pilot program. My friends and I, we went out and found a couple of people who were homeless, who had mental disabilities, who were drug addicts, and we went through an entire process of getting these people off the streets and into jobs, into stable lives and into jobs. And this was done as a mere side project, as a gig. In my case, it was amongst many of the other things I was working on in life. But the head guy, the main friend of mine, he was sort of managing the whole process. And the volunteers, we were adding these projects to our very busy schedule. So everything I've described, we did, and we did successfully. We know it works. We know what solutions have to be brought to bear. But let me tell you, it's not cheap, okay? This is a very expensive process. To get somebody off of a heroin addiction, for example, to get somebody off of a cocaine addiction combined with a heroin addiction who has a mental disability, I would venture to say it's going to be in excess of $100,000 per person. This is not cheap. I mean, when you add up all the inputs, all the time, all the effort that's going to have to be spent, so it's a big problem, and it's not something that we could ever expect or hope a family to be able to achieve, because just the monetary side of it will be cost prohibitive when the families are around. And then there's one other little criteria, there's one other little variable, I should say, that we can add to this conversation. And that is, if you're the mom and dad of a drug-addicted child, you actually have very little influence over that kid. And the reason why, it's very simple. This is human nature. God made humans to grow up and to stop listening to the mom and dad, and to go out into the world and do your own thing. So it's not even realistic to think that mom and dad, even in this world that we're talking about, has the sway and the ability to solve these problems. However, if these people that are in that very difficult situation, homelessness, drug addiction, untreated mental disability, it's human nature to trust a friend, somebody who's trying to help you, someone who's got your back, someone who is there to pick you up off the ground, not in a parental way, but in a friendship way. That works. That's a very basic part of the human psyche. And that was the approach that we took amongst my friends. So what I'm saying is absolutely the only way to go, but it's a big project.